everything has been well for you, that you started the new year off fresh. You're almost coming up on the second quarter, the end of the first quarter. Hope everything has been moving and matriculating the way you want it to. But man, it's been a minute, man. I took a long hiatus from podcasting, been trying to jump on other people's podcasts, man. So many things have happened. So many things been going on. But I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be back finally, man. So what's up with y'all? What's up with y'all? What's going on with y'all, man? If y'all haven't been following me, excuse me, multiple things has been happening on my front. We're going to recap that real quick. Then I'm gonna do a couple, quick topics. Something that I want to talk about today that kind of made me gear back up to go back into podcasting because, you know, I was just seeing a lot of stuff around, you know, therapy, helping people, mental health, certain interventions, and just, how you show up to help your clients. If you know me, I'm really big on how I show up in reference to meeting my ideal client population and niche. And it kind of came out the presentation that I was doing, which we will recap last Friday down the Millennial Social Work Conference. Shout out to the Millennial Social Work Conference. Shout out to Erica and her team and everybody that I, met down there in Atlanta. But, just, meeting, are you speaking your client's ideal language, right? And understanding that you don't have to be this traditional role as a therapist, as a mental health professional, as a social worker. You don't have to meet that actual, excuse me, how you say, quote unquote, stereotypical role of what it looks like to be a therapist or a social worker or a mental health professional. You can go by and do things your way to still get the as desired and achieve the result. And what I'm going to talk about today is, how doing that even before I became an actual mental health professional. No, I'm going to take that back. Before I became a social worker and a licensed therapist, there was a couple things that I did in my career path on the way to the graduate degree to actually establish the foundations of what my practice is built off today. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to keep you long, but I just wanted to kind of go over that a little bit and just, discuss that. But first, let me recap real quick. Shout out to the Millennial Social Work Conference. I presented down there last week in Atlanta, Georgia. Shout out to Erica for inviting me. Everybody that I met that came to the presentation. I know I was in and out, but, it was, I came down to do a presentation, had my family with me. And so I wanted to make sure that I was attentive to them as well. First in-person presentation in 3 years. And so that felt amazing. A little nerve-wracking at first, but, we worked through the jitters and we got through and did our presentation, talked about how you build a private practice and a virtual private practice in a pandemic. That's what we talked about. So that's going up. I have an event with Doc Space, which I'm going to do a separate episode to talk about that. Doc Space coming up in Chicago in 2 weeks. And then I have some other stuff on the horizon coming down the pike, but I'll let you guys know about that information-wise. Private practice has been going well. Had to make some changes from an overhead standpoint. That's been going good. I'm fully booked and still getting referrals, trying to figure out how I'm going to navigate that. Eligible to be a clinical supervisor. So I'm working on figuring out how that's going to work out in the next coming months, so, a lot of things are moving right now and I'm at a good place, I feel like, and so I think it was a great time to get back on the podcast, of course. Also, too, if you haven't checked out my second podcast, check out Free Smoke Podcast, which is with me and my homeboys. We talk about a bunch of different topics. Our last episode was amazing, talking about Black men and mental health, stress, parenting, absentee fathers, conflict, X, Y, and Z, man. So you want to make sure you check out that as well, because Free Smoke is like kind of my second project and baby, and it's a little bit different version of me. You don't get the professional over here, but you get the real Trey over there. So shout out to everybody, man. I'm still working on my book. Shout out to everybody that continue to support me, share my posts, listen to the podcast. come to my speaking engagements, events, whatever, shout out to all of y'all, man. Y'all appreciate every one of y'all. If you want more behind the scenes episodes or bonus episodes, please come over to the Patreon, become a part of the Relax crew. You can do that for a small fee, monthly fee, and get access to bonus episodes. So, yes, the book is coming in October. That's we almost finished getting that recordings out, so we almost done with that as well. So it's a good time, man. We're a good place. We're a good place. I like where everything is going right now. So, and we're doing some little video on this podcast. We're gonna see what happens from that, right? So, anyways, I hope everybody's good. I hope everybody's good. Let's go ahead and hop into this topic real quick, man. It's been a minute since I've been on here, man. But listen. So everybody knows that I'm really big into sneakers, cars, and coffee. If you haven't figured out by now, you've probably been under a rock. Before you even knew me as a social worker or a therapist, that was kind of my main go-tos. If you didn't know me from the sneakers, you probably knew me from the cars. You probably also knew me from basketball and also coffee as well. So those are my kind of like hobbies, things I love to do, things that I love to indulge in outside of being a social worker, therapist, community advocate, dad, husband, all of that. This is something else I jump into, right? So I'll tell y'all a story, man. And it goes with, because you got to understand something, man. These social work programs, these mental health programs that we are getting, running through, going into so much debt through, we get trained by these interventions, these ideologies, these theologians or philosophers that have this certain school of thought that typically, if you want to be really honest, meets a certain criteria. Most of this didn't have, let's say, African Americans or the Black community or people of color, minority groups in mind when they created said interventions that allow us to practice therapy or, mental health the way we should know how to do, in such that will require reimbursement or is the correct ethical way or whatever you want to call it. So, for me, I've always looked at most of these interventions, most of these books, the book stuff that we get taught with a grain of salt. I understand they guide practice and interventions, understand that they guide our practice, but I never really subscribe to all of them. Some of them make sense, right? You can implement in a few. Some of you take certain parts of and you cultivate what fits for your client. Like I know, all of those things don't always work in the midst of the therapy session or the mental health community room, on the unit, or just in general. They don't always typically work, right? Not by the book or how it says it goes. And so with that being said, it's always been kind of, confusing to me that we as a field are so heavily predicated on use of those interventions in order to build rapport or to work with your clients and help them heal from these different symptoms. But we don't take into the account, which I'm really big on, building trust, safety, and rapport with the client first in order to use these interventions. Now, even with that being said, the interventions that are being used does not include some of those cultural and environmental standards, techniques. I feel like, I might be mistaken, but this is my, my opinion. They don't include any of those cultural or environmental standards that also could play a role in actual outcomes of the treatment, outcomes of the modality, outcomes of the intervention, or just best outcomes and best practices for that person in that certain situation. I think sometimes we like to generalize every person's symptomology or things that come in to these areas of wanting to receive help with mental health in one vacuum. Like it's just one thing, and we have to use that in order to make it, work. So I'm a big outside of the box thinker anyway, and I don't like being boxed in regardless. I've never liked being boxed in personally, career wise, any of that. I never liked to be boxed in. So I'll tell you a story real quick. When I was working at psychiatric inpatient unit, where we had, adult men, adult women, kids and adolescents, and we had separate units for both of them. Excuse me, but we did combine them at one point. And so I took it as a time, again, big into sneakers, big into basketball, coffee, and cars, right? What I would find is that these things that I would do was a conversation piece or a piece that connected me and that person. A lot of times when you're in these units, right, it's the patient and the staff, right? But these still are human beings who come in with, either they have mental illness or they have, they have issues going on in their life that they can't manage no more. They become suicidal, psychotic, or, this, that, and the third. I would always wear my favorite sneakers on the unit. That was one big thing. I always wear my favorite sneakers on the unit. And then I always, of course, these units always have coffee, right? So coffee is kind of seen as one of those talking points where if you get a cup of coffee, you can have a conversation, you get to know each other, you get to know the person, right? So we always go get coffee, always have that on the unit as kind of one of those staples. We'll do groups with the coffee. And so I've learned in that aspect of, how big coffee could be in just the conversation piece and getting to know somebody. It breaks the barrier down, right? If we're sitting there having a conversation about coffee, I'm not just, I'm the staff on this unit, and you're a patient, but we're human beings having dialogue about what's going on. You feel what I'm saying? Whether that's your own personal issue or that what brought you into the psych unit, or just what we're seeing in the world happening, what's happening from the group, this, that, and the third. So coffee was a very instrumental piece on that unit, right? And sometimes interact with the caffeine and client medications, this, that, and there. But I really seen the power of coffee and communication when working on the psych units to have that dialogue, right? So then, when I started wearing my sneakers on the unit, one, that was a expression of myself as a mental health professional to say, I'm not going to conform to these standards. I can wear this and it's still professional. But two, it was also a conversation starter for me and clients. So a lot of clients, even though they might be in a certain situation where they're stressed out or they have this mental health issue, this mental illness, and they need to be in a psychiatric unit because they might be a danger to themselves, danger to others, or don't have capacity to, care for themselves. This was one thing that we could connect with that would, ease some of that burden, right? I'm not saying it takes away the burden, but it's a conversation starter. So I would get compliments or get conversations starting from those sneakers. And while I'm doing that, I'm building rapport and I'm building trust with my clients or my patients on the unit. So let's say they do have a time where they act out and something goes crazy, or they spaz out and they need to get calmed down, because most of the times I was the first person to respond to when they would go off or, get upset, right? We can have a conversation because we built a rapport established off those sneakers, right? And it was like, well, that doesn't make sense, right? It's just a pair of sneakers. But no. Sneakers is culture, right? And a lot of times we kind of look down to the sneaker culture because of the high price items, it's material, and it's caused a lot of rifts, right? Financially, right? And also death. But again, to me, that's a conversation starter. What type of sneakers you got on? And that brings that nostalgia feeling back, regardless of what pair of sneakers it might be. One of my clients would say, oh, I remember having them back in high school. They was nice. I wish I had a pair. And we just struck up a conversation. That conversation breaks down the wall or breaks down the barrier that probably was once there when that person came to the unit, seeing the staff or seeing me as a person who is holding them out, holding them, back from, going back into the world outside us, but not getting the treatment. But it breaks that barrier down and we have a commonality. You feel what I'm saying? And I also would say that piece of sneakers, right, was also the catalyst in helping me with my Goodfellas group that I did for Black men down the road, where we bonded over sneakers. And as a result of us bonding over sneakers, we could all have conversations and be vulnerable with ourselves because we started to learn more about each other. We started to know each other, and then we started to connect. And then by us connecting and being vulnerable and trusting one another, next thing you know, we talking more than just sneakers. We talking about life, stress, how we deal with this, that, and the third. It was the same thing on the unit. So that's the second piece. The third piece was that the mindfulness group that I do right now that I did not know was mindfulness back then is my car group. My car group was birthed out of the fact that I was new to the unit, fresh out of undergrad, had no idea what I was doing as far as group therapy or running a unit. And we had to do groups as on the unit and psychiatry unit. And I was talking to my coworker. They was like, well, just do this or you can do that. And just do whatever and make something up, So I made something up. My favorite thing is cars. What I would do is, I'll have, especially when they separated to just one, like the male unit, men unit, and the women unit. When it was just a men unit, I would typically be on that side. And, I would do a car group, right? I would have guys pick out their favorite car. I had a whiteboard. Everybody lists out their favorite car. All right. And I put my car up there too. Put up 1 or 2 cars. And we list them out. So then for a minute, I have them visualize that car and driving in it, what it looks like, what it feels like, describe everything to me. Open our eyes, we come back, we describe it all in detail. You feel what I'm saying? Just have a good conversation about it, right? And so then after that, I talk to them about what are the emotions and feelings that you felt in relation to sitting there visualizing that card. So people would say happiness, sad, happiness or joy, pride, all these different things. Always listed the same responses every single time. So then I turn around and I asked them, which, kind of was right? We're in the hospital, but, psych unit, but it's like, but it still was, you still need to ask and understand where you're coming from. Do you have these things in your life today? Right? And the questions will typically be, well, no, I don't, or yes, I do, or maybe, or not so much. And then we talk about how do we get that back? That's part of the discharge plan. That's part of the aftercare plan. How do I get these feelings back, these emotions back? How do I get happiness back? How do I get fulfillment back? How do I get joy back? How do I get my pride back? That is the thing that I use and has been the catalyst of me doing mindfulness. If you've ever been to one of my groups, I do mindfulness practice in my groups, and I do mindfulness practice in my individual sessions with my guys as well too. I'm also now EMDR trained, so I slide that a little bit in there as well. But that was the start. That group also connected me to guys, individuals. I expanded to vacation spot, and allowed us to build a rapport. So now, for at least a brief amount of time, it might not be long term, but for a brief amount of time, take your mind off being in this unit and what got you into this unit. You can start to actively process what's happening. And also you have developed trust and rapport with the staff. Staff has built that trust and rapport with the client. So if something does go awry on the unit, or you feel like you need to talk to this tech, which will be me, about something that's going on, you can have that conversation now because the walls and the barriers have been broken. So I say all that to say, I never knew none of all of that stuff that I did back then, post undergrad, would lay the foundation for me as a therapist today. But that has nothing to do with what I learned in my grad school program or my undergrad program. All it has to do with is treating people with compassion, love, and respect, but also building trust, safety, and rapport with each individual client. Not like they're a patient or a number or assurance bill, but as a human being. Because these are the same thing I would do outside of the psych unit. If I was to see them and never knew that it was in the psych unit, I would do the same thing. If I had sneakers on, it's a conversation starter out in the outside world. If I had a cup of coffee, that's typically a conversation starter. If I'm sitting in Starbucks or just, doing whatever, kicking in whoever, right? These are those type of things, the catalyst, the foundations that will allow you to establish trust, safety, and rapport with your client. So even today, when I'm working on my therapy session, my clients are so funny, man. We'll get through all of everything we need to work through. And at the end, they say, hey, check out this movie, check out this show. What do you think about this sneaker? Or we might do it in the beginning too. But just to wind down, break it down. And that's the trust that we have established within this therapeutic atmosphere so that we can work to heal. But we just can't always get straight to the intervention, straight to the modality, because sometimes, and probably for a good portion of times, that's not always going to work. We have to actively always put the trust and safety and rapport first before we get into any of those interventions. So I wanted to just kind of come out here and talk about that and, put that in the atmosphere, man, because I really think it's a important thing. And to understand, especially social work programs, but social work students in these programs, to understand that, you can go outside of the box and create what you want to create within your interventions, within your work that you do with your clients. You can do that. You don't always have to stick to the script. Of course, be ethical. Just be ethical. I'm saying that. But you don't always have to stick to the script. Meet the client where they at. You know what I'm saying? And work with that until you create a common bond so that you can foster the place for effective communication, healing, trust, and working through what you need to work through with these clients. And it's only going to make you a better clinician and make this process a lot easier. So that's all I wanted to say. Hope you learned something from that, take from that. If you got any questions, please hit me up. Again, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, like, share, subscribe, follow. Let me know what you think. Be on the lookout for other episodes. I'm going to be jumping around everywhere for the next couple of months. Got a surprise for you guys in May, so be on the lookout. Check out Free Smoke Podcast. Check out my YouTube. I'm doing videos on YouTube now as well, man. So y'all make sure to subscribe to that channel. It's on Refresh VA. My profile picture is Everybody Relax too, but it's still read that. You know what I'm saying? So make sure you go check that out as well. So hope y'all have a great weekend. Y'all stay cool, be safe, and I'll talk to y'all soon.